The last thing I heard before the machine started beeping was my daughter saying, "Don't worry, Mom. We'll be here when you wake up." The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes, 3 weeks later, was an empty chair and a note that said, "Gone to Hawaii. Back soon. The nurses will take good care of you." 27 years of marriage, 2 children I raised, and they couldn't even wait to see if I'd survive before boarding their first-class flight to paradise. But here's what they didn't know while they were sipping Mai Tais on Waikiki Beach. I was planning something that would make their vacation look like pocket change. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Goldie Turner. I'm 53 years old, and up until 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who my family was. I thought I understood loyalty. I thought I knew what in sickness and in health meant. Turns out I was living with strangers who wore familiar faces. It started on a Tuesday morning in September. I was rushing around the kitchen making breakfast for everyone. Same routine I'd followed for decades. Marcus, my husband, sat at the island scrolling through his phone, while I buttered his toast exactly how he liked it. Light spread, no crust. Our daughter Jessica was grabbing her coffee mug, the one I'd bought her from that little shop in Vermont last summer, and our son David was already honking in the driveway, impatient as always. I felt it then, a sharp pain that shot through my chest like lightning. Not the kind of pain you get from lifting something heavy or sleeping wrong. This was different. This was the kind of pain that makes your vision blur and your knees buckle. I grabbed the counter, trying to steady myself, but the room started spinning. "Marcus," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't look up from his phone. "Marcus, something's wrong." That got his attention. When he saw me gripping the granite countertop, knuckles white, face probably pale as the marble backsplash I'd spent months picking out, he jumped up. "Goldie, what's happening?" "I can't," I started to say, but the words got stuck. The pain was spreading now, radiating down my left arm, squeezing my chest like a vise. "I think I'm having..." I never finished that sentence. The last thing I remembered was Jessica screaming and David running through the front door, his car keys still jingling in his hand. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and voices. Someone kept asking me questions I couldn't answer. Someone else was sticking needles in my arm. I kept trying to focus on Marcus's face, the way he kept saying, "Stay with me, Goldie, stay with me," but everything felt far away, like I was watching it happen to someone else. At the hospital, they used words like massive cardiac event and critical condition. They talked about blocked arteries and emergency surgery. They mentioned percentages that made Marcus go quiet and Jessica start crying. I wanted to tell them I was going to be fine, that I had too much to do to just give up. But the medications made everything fuzzy. The surgery took 6 hours. When I woke up in the ICU, tubes everywhere, machines monitoring every heartbeat, the first face I saw was Marcus. He looked older somehow, like he'd aged years in a single day. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair messy, and he had that lost expression he got whenever something was broken, and he couldn't fix it himself. "Hey there, fighter," he said, taking my hand carefully, avoiding all the IV lines. "You scared us." I tried to smile, tried to say something reassuring, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube. All I managed was a squeeze of his hand. Jessica appeared next to him, her eyes red from crying. "Mom, thank God, we thought we lost you." David was there too, standing at the foot of the bed, looking uncomfortable in the way men do in hospitals. "The doctors say you're going to be okay," he said. "It'll just take time." Time, that word would haunt me for weeks. The first few days in the ICU passed in a haze of medication and monitoring. Marcus stayed most of the time, sleeping in that awful chair that couldn't have been comfortable for anyone, especially not a man his size. Jessica brought me flowers, the kind of expensive arrangements she usually only bought for special occasions. David visited every evening after work, always bringing something: magazines I couldn't focus on, crossword puzzles I was too weak to solve. They were attentive, loving, Exactly what you'd expect from a family facing crisis. Marcus held my hand during the worst of it, when the pain medication wasn't quite enough, and everything hurt. Jessica brushed my hair when the nurses were too busy. David figured out how to work the TV remote when I couldn't manage all the buttons. I should have known something was different when they started having hushed conversations in the hallway, little clusters of whispered words that stopped whenever a nurse walked by. I should have paid attention when Jessica kept checking her phone, scrolling through something that made her face light up in a way that seemed wrong for a hospital room, but I was focused on breathing, on healing, on trying to get strong enough to go home. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. My heart was responding well to the medications. The surgical repairs looked good. I was what they called a remarkable recovery, especially for someone my age who'd had such a severe attack. By the end of the first week, I was out of the ICU and in a regular room. Better lighting, a window that actually opened, and a bathroom I could use without help. Progress. Marcus seemed relieved. More like himself. He started talking about modifications we'd need to make at home, how we'd rearrange the bedroom so I wouldn't have to climb stairs right away. The guest room downstairs would be perfect, he said, already planning. We can move the TV down there, maybe get one of those adjustable beds, whatever you need. I loved him for thinking ahead, for assuming I'd want everything to be exactly as it was before, just with accommodations for my new reality. I loved that he was making plans that included me, that considered my comfort, my recovery. That was Thursday. Friday morning, Jessica came in with coffee for everyone, including the nurses, which wasn't like her but seemed sweet. She was more animated than she'd been all week, talking about her job, about some project she was excited about. She kept glancing at David, little looks that passed between them like they were sharing a secret. "Mom," she said, settling into the chair next to my bed, "we need to talk to you about something." My heart rate monitor started beeping a little fast. After what I'd just been through, those words carried weight. Marcus moved closer to the bed, taking my hand again. "It's nothing bad," he said quickly. "Actually, it's something good, something we've been planning." Planning? My voice was still hoarse, but getting stronger every day. David stepped forward, his hands in his pockets in that nervous way he'd had since he was a kid. "We booked a trip," he said. "All of us. Well, all of us except you, obviously, since you're still recovering." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. "A trip? Hawaii," Jessica said, her voice brightening. "We've been talking about it for months. Remember, that family vacation we kept saying we'd take when everyone's schedules aligned?" I did remember, vaguely. Conversations over dinner about someday taking a real vacation together, the kind with beaches and room service, and no responsibilities. But those had been abstract discussions, someday plans, not immediate arrangements. "When?" I asked. Marcus squeezed my hand gently. "Next week, just for a few days. You'll still be here, getting stronger, and the timing actually works out perfectly. You won't be ready to travel for months anyway, and the doctors say you're past the critical phase." I stared at the three of them, trying to understand what I was hearing. "You're going to Hawaii while I'm in the hospital. The doctors say you're doing great," David said quickly. "Better than expected. And the nurses are amazing. You'll be in good hands, better hands than ours. Honestly," Jessica added with a laugh that felt forced. "They actually know what they're doing." I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to say something different, to explain why this made sense. "Goldie, honey, you know we wouldn't go if there was any danger, but you're stable now, strong, and frankly, we all need a break after this scare. A break from me, from my heart attack, from the inconvenience of my near-death experience." "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Jessica and David exchanged another look. "We booked it Tuesday," Jessica said, "after the doctors said you were going to be okay." Tuesday, the day after my surgery, while I was still unconscious, still fighting to survive, they were making vacation plans. "We thought it would be a good way to celebrate, Marcus, to mark the fact that you pulled through, that we all made it through this together, by leaving me alone in a hospital room, while they celebrated my survival on a beach 2,000 miles away." I wanted to say something, to tell them how wrong this felt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. How abandoned it made me feel, but the words wouldn't come. Maybe it was the medication, or maybe it was shock, or maybe it was the dawning realization that the people I'd spent my life taking care of saw my recovery as their opportunity for a vacation. How long? I managed to ask. Just a week, Marcus said. 7 days. You'll probably barely notice we're gone, honestly. You sleep most of the time anyway. That stung more than it should have. The idea that my presence in their lives was so minimal that a week-long absence would be barely noticeable. We'll call every day, Jessica promised, and we'll bring you back something special, a souvenir, from the vacation they took while I recovered from a heart attack. I nodded, because what else could I do? I was stuck in a hospital bed, dependent on machines and medications, hardly in a position to argue or make demands. And they were right about one thing. I was past the critical phase. The doctors had said so themselves. When do you leave? I asked. Sunday, David said. Early flight. 2 days. They were leaving in 2 days. The rest of Friday passed in a blur of trip preparations, disguised as hospital visits. Jessica brought me a new nightgown, something pretty for while they were gone, she said. Marcus made sure I had the good magazines, the ones from the gift shop downstairs that cost too much, but had actual articles instead of just celebrity gossip. David programmed the TV with all my favorite channels, showed me how to use the call button if I needed anything. They were being thoughtful, considerate, making sure I'd be comfortable in their absence. But underneath all that consideration was the unmistakable message that they were leaving, that my medical crisis had been successfully managed and filed away, and that their lives could resume their normal patterns. Saturday was work. They all seemed distracted, thinking about packing and flights and hotel reservations. Jessica kept showing me pictures on her phone of the resort where they'd be staying, a place with infinity pools and private beaches, and restaurants that required reservations months in advance. Look at this spa, she said, holding up a photo of a treatment room overlooking the ocean. I booked us all massages for Wednesday. After this week, we definitely need some relaxation. This week, the week I nearly died, the week they'd spent in hospitals and waiting rooms, and uncomfortable chairs, the week that had been so stressful for them that they needed a luxury vacation to recover. Marcus was different too, more distant. He'd started talking about practical things, about the insurance paperwork he'd need to handle while they were gone, about which neighbor had a key to the house in case of emergencies. It was like he was already mentally on the plane. The flight leaves at 6 in the morning, he told me Saturday night, so we'll probably head out around 3:30 to make sure we don't hit traffic. 3:30 in the morning. They'd leave while I was sleeping, slip away before I woke up. Will you say goodbye? I asked. He looked surprised by the question. Of course, we'll stop by before we head to the airport, but I could see it in his eyes, the calculation he was making. How long would it take to get to the hospital, say goodbye, get back to the airport, check in, get through security? How much time could they afford to spend on me before their vacation officially began? Sunday morning came too early and too quiet. I'd been awake since 4, listening to the sounds of the hospital waking up around me. Shift changes, breakfast preparations, the constant background hum of machines, and conversations, and life continuing regardless of how I felt about any of it. They showed up at 5:15, dressed for travel, looking like a family heading somewhere exciting. Marcus had a new polo shirt, the kind he saved for special occasions. Jessica wore a sundress I'd never seen before, something she must have bought specifically for the trip. David had on shorts and a t-shirt, casual but expensive, the kind of outfit that said vacation without trying too hard. Hey, beautiful, Marcus said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. How are you feeling this morning? Like my family is leaving me in a hospital to go to Hawaii, I wanted to say, but instead I managed. Okay, a little tired. That's normal, Jessica said, checking her phone. The doctor said, you'd be tired for weeks. That's why this timing is actually perfect. You can focus on resting without worrying about us, without worrying about them, as if my concern for their well-being was a burden they needed to escape. David hung back near the door, clearly anxious about time, about traffic, about missing their flight. We should probably get going soon, he said to no one in particular. Of course, I said. You don't want to be late. Marcus squeezed my hand. We'll call tonight, once we get settled, and every day after that, you won't even know we're gone, but I would know. I'd know every minute of every day for the next week. I'd know when I woke up to an empty room, when visiting hours came and went with no visitors, when the nurses asked about my family, and I had to explain that they were in Hawaii. Have a wonderful time, I said, because it was what they needed to hear, what would let them leave, without guilt. You deserve it, and maybe they did deserve it. Maybe surviving your wife's heart attack, your mother's brush with death, maybe that earned you a week in paradise. Maybe I was being unreasonable, expecting them to put their lives on hold indefinitely while I slowly healed. They each hugged me, careful of the wires and tubes, still connecting me to various machines. Jessica promised to bring me back a shell from the beach. David said he'd take pictures of everything. Marcus kissed me one more time, and told me he loved me. I love you too, I said, and meant it, even though love felt complicated in that moment, tangled up with disappointment, and abandonment, and the growing realization that I might not know these people as well as I thought I did. And then they were gone, wheeling their matching luggage down the hospital corridor, their voices fading, as they discussed parking and departure gates, and whether they'd packed enough sunscreen. I lay there for a long time after they left, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the hospital around me, other families visiting, other patients recovering, other lives continuing in ways that made sense to the people living them. A nurse came in, around 7 to check my vitals, and bring me breakfast, the kind of bland hospital food that looked like it had been designed by committee to offend no one, and satisfy no one. No family this morning? She asked, noting the empty chairs around my bed. They went to Hawaii, I said, trying to make it sound normal, like this was a perfectly reasonable thing for a family to do. She paused in checking my IV line. Hawaii, while you're here. I nodded, suddenly embarrassed, like their decision reflected something about me, about my worth, about whether I was the kind of person whose recovery merited staying close to home. Well, she said, after a moment, I guess that means you'll have some peace and quiet to focus on getting better. Peace and quiet, that was one way to look at it. The first day wasn't so bad. I slept a lot, which was normal according to everyone who asked. I watched morning talk shows and game shows and tried not to think about what time it was in Hawaii, what they might be doing, whether they were thinking about me at all. Marcus called that evening, right after dinner, his voice bright and relaxed in a way I hadn't heard in months. Gold, how are you, sweetheart? We made it safely. The flight was great. The hotel is incredible. I could hear music in the background, the kind of live acoustic guitar you find at resort bars. I could hear Jessica laughing at something someone said. I'm glad you made it safely, I said. How's the weather? Perfect. Absolutely perfect. 82 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. Jessica's already planning to spend the entire day at the beach tomorrow. I tried to picture it, my daughter in a bikini, reading a book under an umbrella while waves lapped at white sand. It should have made me happy, knowing she was relaxed and enjoying herself. Instead, it made me feel further away, more forgotten. How are you feeling? Marcus asked, almost as an afterthought. Better. I lied. The physical therapy starts tomorrow. That's great. See? I told you the timing would work out perfectly. You'll be doing your exercises, getting stronger, and we'll be back before you know it, before I knew it. As if time moved differently for people in hospital beds, as if a week would pass in the blink of an eye instead of stretching out like a prison sentence. Well, I should let you get back to your vacation, I said, though I wanted to keep him on the phone, wanted to hear more about their day, wanted to feel connected to something outside these four walls. Love you, honey. Rest well. We'll talk tomorrow. And that was it. 3 minutes of conversation to cover 12 hours of their absence. The second day was harder. I was more alert, more aware of the silence around me. The physical therapist came in the morning, a cheerful woman named Brenda, who had me walking laps around the nurse's station with a walker, monitoring my heart rate, celebrating small victories like making it to the elevator and back without getting winded. "You're doing remarkably well," she said, as we settled back into my room. "Most patients, your age with your type of cardiac event, aren't this mobile, this quickly. Most patients my age." I was 53, not 83. When had I become old enough to be categorized with patients my age? "Do you have family coming to visit today?" Brenda asked, making notes on her chart. "They're in Hawaii," I said, and immediately felt foolish for explaining. Brenda looked up from her notes. "Oh, well, that's nice for them. Are you from Hawaii originally?" "No, they went on vacation." "While I'm here." The silence that followed was the kind that speaks volumes. Brenda finished her notes and packed up her equipment with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned not to comment on family dynamics. "I'll see you tomorrow, Mrs. Turner. Keep walking when you can." Movement is medicine. Movement is medicine. But what was the medicine for loneliness? For the growing realization that the people you'd built your life around saw your medical crisis as an inconvenience to be managed rather than a trauma to be weathered together. The afternoon stretched endlessly. I tried reading, but couldn't concentrate. I tried watching TV, but every commercial seemed to be for vacations or family togetherness, or things that reminded me of what I didn't have in that moment. I tried sleeping, but I wasn't tired, just restless and increasingly aware of how quiet the room was, how empty. Other patients had visitors. I could hear them in the hallway, families gathered around bedsides, conversations and laughter and the comfortable noise of people who cared about each other. I felt like I was watching life through a window, seeing something I recognized but couldn't quite read. Marcus called again that evening. Later this time, I could tell he'd been drinking, his words just slightly looser, his laugh a little too loud for the phone. "Goldie, we had the most amazing day. We did this snorkeling thing, saw these incredible fish, and then we had lunch right on the beach. Jessica got a little too much sun, but she looks great, happy." I wanted to ask if he was happy too, if this vacation was everything he'd hoped it would be. I wanted to ask if he missed me, if he thought about me while they were exploring coral reefs and eating fresh fish and living the life we'd always talked about having together someday. "That sounds wonderful," I said instead. "How was your physical therapy?" "Good." I walked to the elevator. "That's great, honey. Really great progress." There was a pause, filled with the sound of whatever tropical paradise they were calling home for the week. "Marcus?" I said. "Yeah? Do you wish I was there with you?" Another pause, longer this time. "Of course I do, Goldie. You know that." I thought about the last 27 years of my marriage, the last 25 years of motherhood, and tried to identify moments when I'd clearly articulated what I needed, instead of just adapting to what was convenient for everyone else. The list was surprisingly short. That evening, Marcus called again, but this time I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear about their adventures, wasn't ready to pretend I was happy for them. I needed space to think, to figure out what I was feeling, and why it mattered. The voicemail was cheerful, slightly slurred. They'd had dinner at some famous restaurant, tried some local specialties, taken a sunset cruise. Jessica had bought me a necklace. David had learned to surf. They were having the time of their lives. "Hope you're resting well, honey. Love you. We'll try calling again tomorrow." Try calling, as if reaching out to their wife and mother in the hospital was just one item on a list of vacation activities, something they'd attempt if they found time between massages and snorkeling excursions. I didn't return the call. The fourth day brought a visitor I hadn't expected. My sister Claire, who lived 3 hours away and hadn't spoken to me in months, walked into my room, carrying flowers and wearing the worried expression of someone who'd just learned terrible news. "Goldie, oh my God, what happened? I got your message, but I was in Seattle for work and I just got back, and I came as soon as I could." I stared at her, confused. "What message?" "The message you left Tuesday night. About the heart attack. About being in the hospital." I was in meetings all day Wednesday and Thursday, and I didn't check my personal voicemail until last night. Tuesday night. I hadn't called Claire Tuesday night. I'd been unconscious Tuesday night. I didn't call you, I said slowly. Claire looked confused. But someone did. It was your voice. Definitely your voice. You said you'd had a heart attack and you were in the hospital, and you wanted me to know. My voice. Someone had called Claire using my voice. What exactly did the message say? Claire sat down, still holding the flowers. It said, Claire, it's Goldie and I'm in the hospital. I had a heart attack and I wanted you to know. I'm going to be okay, but I wanted my sister here. That was it. My sister here. I stared at Claire, trying to process what she was telling me. Someone had called her, using my voice somehow, asking for her to come, but I hadn't made that call. Claire, I said carefully, where do you think that message came from? She shrugged. I assumed you called Tuesday night. Maybe when you were sedated or confused from the medication. People do that sometimes. Call family members and don't remember doing it. But I knew I hadn't called her, which meant someone else had. Someone who had access to my voice, who knew Claire's number, who thought I needed my sister there, even if I didn't know it myself. The realization hit me slowly, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The only people who had access to my phone were Marcus, Jessica, and David. The only people who would know Claire's number, who would think to call her, who would understand that I might need family support during my recovery. One of them had called Claire, using my voice somehow, asking her to come. But why? And why hadn't they told me? Claire, I said, what day is it? Thursday. Thursday afternoon. I drove straight here from Seattle. Thursday. They'd been gone for 4 days. They'd left on Sunday, and someone had called Claire on Tuesday, the day after they'd left for Hawaii. Have you talked to Marcus, or the kids? Claire shook her head. I came straight here. Why? I looked at my sister, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. We'd grown apart after our parents died, not from any specific disagreement, but from the gradual drift that happens when people get busy with their own lives. She'd never married, never had children, built a successful career in marketing that kept her traveling most of the time. But she'd dropped everything to drive 3 hours to see me in the hospital, based on a message she thought I'd left asking for her. They're in Hawaii, I said. Who's in Hawaii? Marcus, Jessica, David, my family. They're in Hawaii. Claire stared at me. While you're here, in the hospital after a heart attack? I nodded, suddenly embarrassed again, like their absence was a reflection of my worth as a wife and mother. What the hell, Goldie? Why would they go to Hawaii while you're recovering from cardiac surgery? It was the first time anyone had asked that question directly, without trying to rationalize or explain or find the silver lining. They said I was past the critical phase. They said it was good timing, that I needed to focus on recovery anyway. Claire was quiet for a long time, processing what I'd told her. Finally, she said, and you were okay with this? I didn't really have a choice. I was in a hospital bed, dependent on machines. What was I going to do? Forbid them from going? Yes, Claire said firmly. That's exactly what you should have done. You should have said, absolutely not. This is insane. I nearly died and you want to go on vacation. That's what you should have said. Hearing her say it so clearly, so definitively, made something shift inside me. The doubt I'd been carrying, the question of whether I was being unreasonable, started to dissolve. Claire was right. It was insane. I should have said no, but they already had it planned, I said weakly. So what? Plans change. People cancel trips all the time for family emergencies. This was a family emergency. They said it wasn't. Since I was stable. Claire looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Goldie, you had a massive heart attack. You had emergency surgery. You're 53 years old and you almost died. That's not something you recover from in a few days. That's something that changes everything. That makes families pull together, not fly apart. She was right. And hearing her say it, made me realize how much I'd been minimizing my own experience, how much I'd been accepting other people's definitions of what mattered and what didn't. How long are they gone for? Claire asked. Until Sunday. 3 more days. And they call you every day? So far. Marcus calls in the evening, tells me about their adventures. Claire was quiet again, but I could see the anger building in her face. The kind of protective rage you feel when someone you love is being mistreated. Goldie, she said finally, I think we need to talk about some things. About this marriage. About this family. About what's been going on that led to them thinking this was acceptable. I wanted to defend them. To explain that they weren't bad people. That they'd been scared and stressed and deserved a break. But the words wouldn't come. Because sitting there with Claire, seeing the situation through her eyes, I was starting to understand that maybe the problem wasn't just their decision to go to Hawaii, maybe the problem was bigger than that, older than that, more fundamental than. Maybe the problem was that I'd spent so many years being convenient, being accommodating, being the kind of wife and mother who never made unreasonable demands, that they'd forgotten I was a person with feelings and needs and the right to expect basic consideration. Maybe the problem was that I'd forgotten too. That night, I didn't answer when Marcus called. I let it go to voicemail again, and this time I didn't even listen to the message. Instead, I sat with Claire, talking about things we hadn't discussed in years, about our childhood, about the different paths our lives had taken, about the choices we'd made and the prices we'd paid for them. You know what I remember about you? Claire said as we shared the chocolate pudding she'd bought from the cafeteria. You were the one who always made peace. When Mom and Dad fought, you'd find a way to smooth things over. When I was being a brat, you'd figure out how to make everyone happy. You were the accommodator, the one who bent so everyone else could stay rigid. That sounds terrible when you put it like that. It's not terrible, it's just limiting. There's a difference between being kind and being a doormat, between being loving and being invisible. That word hit me hard, because it was exactly how I'd felt watching them prepare for Hawaii, how I'd felt during their phone calls, how I'd felt lying in this hospital bed for the past 4 days. I don't want to be invisible anymore, I said, and it was the first completely true thing I'd said since waking up from surgery. Then don't be, Claire said simply. You have more power than you think you do. You just have to decide to use it. That night, after Claire left, I lay awake thinking about power, about choices, about the difference between being a victim and being someone who refuses to accept unacceptable treatment. I thought about the message Claire had received, the voice message that had brought her here when I needed family support most. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the call log, looking for Tuesday's calls. There it was, clear as daylight. A call to Claire's number at 11:47 p.m. Tuesday night, lasting 3 minutes and 12 seconds. But I'd been unconscious Tuesday night, heavily sedated, connected to machines that would have alerted the nurses if I'd so much as moved wrong. Someone else had made that call. Someone who'd used technology I didn't understand, to replicate my voice, to reach out to my sister when they knew I'd need support. Someone who'd understood, even when I didn't, that being left alone in a hospital while your family vacationed was wrong. The question was who, and more importantly, why hadn't they told me? I scrolled through more of the call log, looking for patterns, for clues about what else might have happened while I was recovering. There were the expected calls, incoming ones, from Marcus and the kids, a few from my work colleagues who'd heard about the heart attack, but there were other calls too, outgoing ones I definitely hadn't made. One to my insurance company on Wednesday morning, discussing coverage for extended care. One to my boss on Wednesday afternoon, explaining that I'd need more time off than originally anticipated. One to our family lawyer on Thursday morning, a conversation that had lasted nearly 40 minutes. Someone had been managing my life, making necessary calls, handling logistics I wouldn't have thought of in my medicated state. Someone had been protecting my interests while I focused on healing. But who? The answer came Friday morning, when Dr. Patel arrived for his daily rounds, with a surprise companion, a young woman in her early 30s, professionally dressed, carrying a tablet, and wearing the kind of confident expression that belonged to someone comfortable with technology. Mrs. Turner, Patel said, I'd like you to meet Rebecca Chen. She's been coordinating some aspects of your care that you might not be aware of. Rebecca stepped forward with a warm smile. Hello, Mrs. Turner. I'm sorry for the mystery. But I wanted to wait until you were strong enough for this conversation. I stared at her, trying to place her face, her voice, any connection to my life that would explain her presence. I'm sorry, do we know each other? Not directly. No, I'm a patient advocate, and I specialize in situations where families are either unable or unwilling to provide adequate support during medical crises. Unable or unwilling. The words hung in the air like an indictment. I don't understand, I said. Who hired you? Rebecca glanced at Dr. Patel, who nodded encouragingly. That's where it gets interesting. You did. I definitely didn't hire anyone. I was unconscious for days. You're right. You were unconscious, but before your surgery, while you were still alert but heavily medicated, you signed several documents, standard medical forms, power of attorney paperwork, that sort of thing. Buried in that paperwork was a consent form for something called adaptive care coordination. She pulled out her tablet and showed me a document with my signature, shaky but recognizable. This program uses AI technology to monitor patient situations and provide support when family systems aren't functioning optimally. It's designed to step in when patients are vulnerable and potentially being neglected. I read the document, trying to remember signing it, trying to understand what I'd agreed to. So you've been making phone calls using my voice. The AI system has been making necessary communications to ensure your welfare and protect your interests. It analyzes patterns in family behavior, identifies potential problems, and takes action to address them. In your case, it detected that your family had abandoned you during a medical crisis and began implementing protective measures. Abandon. There it was, the word I'd been afraid to use, spoken by a stranger who'd been watching my situation objectively. What kind of protective measures? Rebecca sat down, settling in for what was clearly going to be a longer conversation. Initially, basic support coordination, calling your sister to ensure you had family advocacy, contacting your insurance company to maximize your benefits, communicating with your employer to protect your job security, standard things that family members usually handle but that were being neglected in your case. What else? Financial protection measures. The system detected that significant family assets were being spent on luxury travel, while you faced potential medical bankruptcy. It began implementing strategies to secure your financial position. My heart rate monitor started beeping fast. What kind of strategies? Dr. Patel stepped forward. Mrs. Turner, your vitals are elevating. Perhaps we should continue this conversation when you've had time to process. No, I said firmly. I want to know what's been done in my name. Rebecca consulted her tablet. The AI system has been very busy. It filed paperwork to freeze joint accounts pending medical necessity review. It initiated an inquiry into whether luxury travel expenses during a spouse's medical crisis constitutes financial abandonment under state law. It also began documenting the pattern of neglect for potential legal proceedings. I stared at her, trying to process what she was telling me. While I'd been lying in this bed feeling sorry for myself, artificial intelligence had been waging war on my behalf. Are you telling me that my family's accounts have been frozen? The accounts that are solely in your husband's name remain accessible. The joint accounts, however, have been temporarily restricted, pending review of expenditures during your medical crisis. It's a standard protective measure to prevent financial abuse of incapacitated patients. Financial abuse. I'd never thought of it that way, but spending thousands on a Hawaiian vacation while your wife recovered from near-fatal surgery could certainly be seen in that light. When did this happen? The freeze went into effect yesterday morning, Hawaiian time, about the time your family would have been checking out of their hotel for their last few days at the resort. Yesterday morning, they'd been in Hawaii for 5 days, spending freely, living lavishly, and then suddenly their access to money had been cut off. I tried to imagine Marcus's face when his credit card was declined, when he tried to pay for dinner or spa treatments or whatever expensive activities they'd planned for their final days. Have they tried to contact me about this? Rebecca shook her head. The system has been monitoring your communications. No calls, no texts, no attempts to reach you since the accounts were frozen. So they knew something was wrong, knew their vacation funding had disappeared, but they hadn't thought to call the wife whose medical crisis they'd abandoned to check if she was okay, if she needed anything, if she might be behind the financial disruption they were experiencing. That told me everything I needed to know about their priorities. What happens next? I asked. That depends on you, Rebecca said. The AI system can only take protective actions. It can't make decisions about your relationships, your marriage, your future. Those choices are yours to make. But it can provide options. Absolutely. It's already compiled a comprehensive analysis of your financial situation, your legal rights, and your available resources. When you're ready, we can review everything and discuss your alternatives. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. Miss Turner, I have to ask, how are you feeling about all of this information? I considered the question carefully. How was I feeling? Shocked, certainly, overwhelmed by the scope of what had been done in my name. But underneath the shock was something else, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Relief. For the first time since waking up in this hospital, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't feel forgotten or abandoned or invisible. Someone, even if it was an artificial intelligence system, had been looking out for me, protecting my interests, ensuring that I wasn't taken advantage of while I was vulnerable. I feel like someone finally has my back, I said honestly. Rebecca smiled. That's exactly what the system is designed to do, to be your advocate when you can't advocate for yourself. Can I see the analysis, the financial information? Of course, but Mrs. Turner, I should warn you, some of what you're going to learn might be difficult to process. The system has uncovered patterns of financial behavior that suggest this abandonment might not be an isolated incident. Patterns of financial behavior. I thought about all the times Marcus had made major purchases without consulting me, all the family decisions that had been presented to me as foregone conclusions rather than discussion, all the ways I'd been gradually excluded from financial planning, while being expected to contribute my income to joint goals. Show me everything, I said. Rebecca opened her tablet and began pulling up documents, charts, analyses that painted a picture of my marriage I'd never seen before. 27 years of financial decisions, viewed through the lens of someone whose job it was to protect vulnerable people from being exploited by their families. The first chart showed our spending patterns over the past 5 years. Color-coded categories revealed where our money had gone, whose priorities had been funded, whose dreams had been subsidized. Marcus's golf club memberships, his expensive hobbies, his tech gadgets and workshop tools, Jessica's graduate school tuition, her apartment deposits, her car payments that we'd somehow inherited, David's business startup costs, his equipment purchases, his travel expenses for networking events, and then there was my column, minimal, almost invisible, groceries, utilities, household necessities, the background expenses that kept everything running while everyone else's desires were funded and fulfilled. This can't be right, I said, staring at the numbers. I make good money. I've been working full-time for 25 years. You do make good money, Rebecca agreed, but according to the financial records, most of your income has been redirected to what the analysis calls family investment priority. Your personal discretionary spending has remained essentially flat for over a decade, while everyone else's has increased substantially. Family investment priority. It was a clinical way of saying that my money had been used to fund everyone else's life, while my own needs were deemed non-essential. What about savings, retirement accounts? Rebecca pulled up another chart, this one showing account balances over time. Your individual retirement account has grown steadily, which is good, but the joint savings accounts tell a different story. I watched the lines on the graph, saw how money flowed in from both our salaries, but flowed out for purposes that seemed to benefit everyone except me. Large withdrawals for Marcus's investments, for the kids' various needs and wants, for family vacations I'd rarely enjoyed because I'd been too worried about the cost. The Hawaii trip cost $18,000, Rebecca said quietly. First-class flights, oceanfront suites, spa packages, fine dining, activities, $18,000 spent while you were in intensive care, funded entirely from joint accounts that include your contributions. $18,000. I tried to put that number in perspective. It was more than I'd spent on myself in the past 3 years combined. It was more than we'd budgeted for my entire medical recovery. It was more than most people made in several months. They'd spent $18,000 celebrating my survival while I lay alone in a hospital bed. There's more, Rebecca said,
pulling up additional documents. The system also analyzed communication patterns, social media activity, and public records to understand the broader context of your family dynamics. What did it find? A pattern of gradual marginalization. Over the past several years, you've been increasingly excluded from family decisions, social activities, and financial planning. Your role has been progressively reduced to that of a financial contributor rather than a family member with equal standing. She showed me social media posts I'd never seen, family photos where I was either absent or positioned at the edges, like an afterthought, posts about family activities I hadn't been invited to, celebrations I hadn't been included in, decisions that had been made without my input. I stared at a photo from Jessica's birthday last year, a dinner at an expensive restaurant I remembered hearing about but hadn't attended. In the photo, Marcus, Jessica, David, and 3 other people I didn't recognize were raising glasses in a toast. The caption read, "Family dinner with the people who matter most." I wasn't in the photo. I hadn't been invited to my own daughter's birthday dinner. "I don't remember this," I said, pointing to the image. According to the metadata, this was posted while you were working a double shift at the hospital where you're employed. It appears the dinner was scheduled deliberately for a time when you wouldn't be available. They'd planned my daughter's birthday dinner for a time when I'd be working, ensuring I couldn't attend, and then posted about it online as if my absence was natural, expected, unimportant. How many other events?
Since Wednesday, while I'd been struggling with physical therapy and feeling sorry for myself, artificial intelligence had been building a legal fortress around my rights and interests. What else? Your retirement accounts and personal savings are fully protected. Your employment benefits include extended medical leave, which means your job is secure while you recover. And because the Hawaii trip was funded with joint marital assets during a medical crisis, it's likely to be considered dissipation of marital property in divorce proceedings. Dissipation of marital property. A legal term for spending money frivolously when you should be preserving assets for both spouses. $18,000 on a vacation while your wife recovered from a heart attack would definitely qualify. The system has also documented the pattern of financial exclusion and social isolation, which strengthens your position significantly. Courts don't look favorably on spouses who marginalize their partners while benefiting from their contribution. I stared at the documents, at the evidence of systematic neglect I'd been too close to see. Part of me felt vindicated, finally having proof that I wasn't imagining the distance, the exclusion, the gradual erosion of my place in my own family. But another part of me felt devastated, confronting the reality that the people I'd loved most had been planning a life without me. "How long do I have to decide?" I asked. "Legally, there's no rush. The protective measures are in place and will remain so until you make a decision. But practically speaking, your family will return from Hawaii tomorrow, and they'll want answers about what happened to their access to funds. Tomorrow, Marcus, Jessica, and David would come back from their vacation to find their financial world turned upside down, their accounts frozen, their comfortable assumptions about my compliance shattered. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I was the one with power. I was the one who would determine what happened next. "I need to think," I said. "Of course, but, Mrs. Turner, can I give you some advice?" I nodded. "Whatever you decide, don't let them convince you that you're being unreasonable. The AI system doesn't have emotions, doesn't have hurt feelings or family loyalty to cloud its judgment. It looked at your situation objectively and determined that you were being mistreated. That's not an opinion, it's a mathematical analysis of behavior patterns. A mathematical analysis, cold, clinical, unemotional, and apparently more reliable than my own judgment about whether I was being treated fairly by my family." After Rebecca left, I sat alone with the tablet she'd given me, scrolling through months of evidence that my family had been systematically excluding me from their lives, while continuing to benefit from my contributions. Photos, financial records, social media posts, communication pattern, a digital autopsy of a marriage and family relationships that had died so gradually I hadn't noticed. Dr. Patel stopped by in the afternoon, checking on my response to the morning's revelations. "How are you processing all of this information?" he asked. "I keep thinking I should be more upset," I said. "But mostly I just feel clear, Like someone finally explained something I'd been sensing but couldn't articulate. That's a healthy response. Sometimes the most painful part of betrayal is the gaslighting, the way people make you doubt your own perceptions. Having external validation can be incredibly healing. Is it wrong that I'm not devastated, that I'm not crying, or begging them to come back? Dr. Patel sat down, giving me his full attention. Mrs. Turner, you've just learned that people you trusted have been systematically undermining your well-being for years. A healthy response to that information is anger, not grief. Grief is for losing something valuable. Anger is for discovering you've been cheated. Anger is for discovering you've been cheated. That resonated in a way that surprised me. I wasn't mourning the loss of my marriage. I was angry about being deceived about what my marriage actually was. The other thing to consider, Patel continued, is that you're recovering from a major cardiac event. Your body and mind are focused on survival, on healing, on moving forward. Dwelling on past hurts isn't conducive to recovery. So being practical about this situation is actually healthy. Being practical about protecting yourself and planning for your future is extremely healthy. Your heart attack was a warning, Mrs. Turner. Your body was telling you that something in your life was causing dangerous levels of stress. Maybe this crisis is an opportunity to eliminate some of that stress permanently. That evening, I called Claire, not because I needed permission or advice, but because I wanted to hear the voice of someone who cared about my well-being without any agenda. How are you feeling tonight? She asked. Different, I said. Like I've been asleep for years and I'm finally waking up. I told her about Rebecca, about the AI system, about everything I'd learned about my family's financial behavior and social patterns. Claire listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disgust or surprise. I have to say, I'm not shocked, she said when I finished. I've been watching this happen for years, but every time I tried to bring it up, you'd defend them or change the subject. You saw that. Why didn't you say something? I did try, Goldie. Remember 2 Christmases ago, when they went skiing without you? I asked you why you weren't going, and you said you needed to work extra shifts to help pay for the trip. I told you that was insane, and you said I didn't understand family dynamics. I did remember that conversation, and I remembered feeling defensive, like Claire was attacking my family instead of pointing out that I was being excluded from family activities while being expected to fund them. I saw it at Mom's funeral too, Claire continued. The way they positioned themselves during the service, the way they talked about family memories that somehow never included you. I thought it was grief, but looking back, I think it was just their normal pattern. Our mother's funeral, I'd been so focused on making sure everything went smoothly, on managing the logistics and the emotions, that I hadn't noticed I'd been treated like an employee rather than a daughter and sister. Why do you think I couldn't see it? I asked. Because you're living inside a system of dysfunction. It becomes normal. You adapt to smaller and smaller spaces, fewer and fewer rights, less and less consideration. It happens so gradually that you don't realize how far you've been pushed to the margins. Smaller and smaller spaces. That was exactly what had happened. Over the years, my role in my own family had been reduced to provider and facilitator, while my voice, my preferences, my needs, had become increasingly irrelevant. What do you think I should do? What do you want to do? I considered the question. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I was being asked what I wanted, rather than what would be most convenient for everyone else. I want to protect myself, I said. I want to make sure this never happens again. I want to build a life where I matter, where my needs count, where I'm not just useful but valued. Then do that. You have the tools now. You have the information. You have the legal protection. Use them. Even if it means losing my family. Claire was quiet for a moment. Goldie, based on what you've told me, you lost your family years ago. You just didn't know it yet. That night, I made my decision, not out of anger or hurt feelings, but out of a clear understanding of what I needed to do to protect my future. I called the number Rebecca had given me for my attorney. Sarah Martinez answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional even at 8 o'clock in the evening. Mrs. Turner, I've been expecting your call. How are you feeling? ready to move forward, I said. What do I need to know? The protective measures are solid, your assets are secure, the documentation is comprehensive, and your position is strong. The question is how you want to proceed. I want a divorce. I want it to be fair, but fine, and I want to make sure they understand that abandoning me in the hospital was the last mistake they'll make at my expense. Understood. I'll file the paperwork first thing Monday morning. By the time your family returns from Hawaii, the legal process will already be in motion. What about the kids? Jessica and David, Sarah paused. That's trickier. They're adults, so there's no custody issue, but there's also no legal obligation for them to maintain a relationship with you. The financial separation will affect them, since they've been benefiting from the joint resources, but ultimately, whether they choose to repair their relationships with you will be up to them. And if they don't, then you'll know where you stand, and you can plan accordingly. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Tomorrow, Marcus would return from Hawaii, expecting to find the same accommodating wife he'd left behind. Instead, he'd find someone who had learned to value herself appropriately and protect her interests accordingly. I spent Saturday preparing, both physically and emotionally. The physical therapy was going well. I could walk longer distances, climb stairs without getting winded, function independently. Dr. Patel was pleased with my progress and talked about discharge early the following week. Emotionally, I felt like a different person than the woman who'd woken up in the ICU 10 days ago. That woman had been grateful for any attention, accepting of any explanation, willing to minimize her own needs to avoid conflict. This woman understood her worth and was prepared to insist that others recognize it too. Rebecca stopped by in the afternoon with final documents and instructions. Everything is in place, she said. Your financial position is secure, your legal representation is excellent, and you have comprehensive documentation of the pattern of neglect. Whatever happens next, you're protected. What about the AI system? Does it just disappear now that I'm conscious and capable of managing my own affair? The system transitions to an advisory role. It will continue monitoring your situation and alert you to any attempts at financial manipulation or emotional abuse, but the decision-making authority returns to you. That's reassuring. Mrs. Turner, can I ask you something personal? I nod. Do you regret anything about how this has played out? I thought about that question carefully. Did I regret learning the truth about my family? Did I regret having my assets protected? Did I regret discovering that I'd been living a lie for years? I regret that it took a heart attack and an artificial intelligence system to make me realize I deserved better treatment, I said. But I don't regret anything that's happened since then. Rebecca smiled. That's exactly the right answer. Sunday evening came with a text from Marcus. Landing in 2 hours. Can't wait to see you. Hope you're feeling stronger. Can't wait to see you. After a week in paradise, he was ready to resume his normal life, which apparently included me as a supporting character, rather than a central figure. I texted back, I'll be here, and I would be, but not in the way he expected. Marcus arrived at the hospital at 9:30 Sunday night, looking like exactly what he was, a man who'd just returned from an expensive vacation. His skin had that bronze glow that only comes from days of tropical sun, his hair was lighter, and he wore clothes I'd never seen before, the kind of casual linen shirt that screamed resort shopping. He walked into my room carrying a gift bag and wearing the smile of someone who expected to be welcomed back like a returning hero. Goldie, sweetheart, you look amazing, he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. The nurses said you've been making incredible progress. I studied his face, looking for any sign of stress, any indication that he'd discovered the financial freeze, any awareness that his world had shifted while he'd been sipping cocktails on Waikiki Beach. There was none. Either he hadn't tried to access the joint accounts since Friday, or he was a much better actor than I'd given him credit for. How was Hawaii? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. His face lit up with the enthusiasm of someone eager to share vacation stories. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. The weather was perfect, every single day. The hotel was everything the reviews promised, and the kids had such a great time. Jessica learned to paddleboard, and David actually managed to surf a little. He pulled out his phone, already scrolling to show me photos. Look at this sunset from Friday night. We had dinner right on the beach, this amazing seafood place that required reservations months in advance. I looked at the photos he showed me,
Image after image of my family living their best life while I recovered from surgery. Marcus grinning over a plate of expensive-looking fish, Jessica raising a Mai Tai in a toast, David standing on a surfboard, arms raised in victory. They looked happy, relaxed, completely unburdened by any concern for the wife and mother they'd left behind. "It looks like you had a wonderful time," I said. "We did, but we missed you. The whole time we kept talking about how we'll have to come back together when you're feeling better. Maybe next year, when you're fully recovered. Next year, when I was useful again, when I could contribute to the cost and effort of their vacation dreams instead of being an inconvenient reminder of mortality and medical bills." "That sounds nice," I said, though I knew there would be no next year, no family vacation, no pretending that a week of abandonment could be erased with future promises. Marcus set the gift bag on my bedside table with a flourish. "We brought you something special." Jessica picked it out. I opened the bag and found a silk scarf, the kind of generic souvenir you could buy at any tourist shop. It was pretty enough, tropical colors, soft fabric, but it felt like an afterthought, something grabbed at the airport gift shop on the way to catch their flight home. "It's beautiful," I said, because that's what he expected to hear. Jessica said, "It reminded her of you." Elegant and timeless, elegant and timeless, code words for old-fashioned and out of style. I wondered if Jessica had actually said that, or if Marcus was just filling silence with pleasantries that sounded affectionate, but carried subtle digs. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling into the chair he'd occupied before they left. "The nurses said, you've been walking more, getting stronger every day." "Much better. Dr. Patel thinks I can go home by Wednesday." "That's fantastic news. I've been thinking about how to set up the downstairs guest room for you, maybe get one of those adjustable beds, make sure you have everything you need while you're recovering." The downstairs guest room, not our bedroom, not the space we'd shared for 27 years. The guest room, where I could be contained and managed without disrupting the normal flow of household life. "Actually, Marcus, I need to talk to you about some things that happened while you were gone." Something in my tone must have caught his attention because his vacation relaxation faltered slightly. "What kind of things?" "Well, first my sister Claire came to visit. Someone called her Tuesday night to let her know about my heart attack." Marcus looked confused. "I'm glad you had family here." "Who called her?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." "She got a voicemail message. Apparently from me, but I was unconscious Tuesday night, heavily sedated." "Huh, that's weird. Maybe you called earlier and she just got the message late." "No, Marcus, the call was logged on my phone at 11:47 Tuesday night, 3 hours after you left for the airport." I watched his face as he processed this information, saw the moment he realized that someone else had been managing my affairs, making decisions, taking actions he didn't know about. Maybe the hospital staff, sometimes they make calls on behalf of patients. Maybe, but there were other calls too, to my insurance company, to my employer, to a lawyer. That last word hit him like a physical blow. His face went pale under his vacation tan, and his hands gripped the arms of the chair. "A lawyer, Goldie, what's going on?" "I was hoping you could tell me. See, while you were in Hawaii, some interesting things happened with our bank accounts." The color drained completely from his face now. "What do you mean?" "I mean, they've been frozen. All the joint accounts, frozen pending review of expenditures made during my medical crisis." Marcus sat back like I'd slapped him. "Frozen? By who?" "By the court system, Mark. Apparently, spending $18,000 on a vacation while your spouse recovers from a heart attack can be considered financial abandonment." $18,000? His voice cracked. "It wasn't 18,000. First-class flights for 3 people to Hawaii, ocean view suites, at a 5-star resort, spa treatments, fine dining, activities, shopping." "Yes, Marcus, it was $18,000. $18,000 of our money spent celebrating my survival while I lay alone in a hospital bed." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, apparently doing the math in his head and realizing I was right. "Goldie, you have to understand, we thought you were okay. The doctors said you were stable, that you were past the crisis. We thought it would be good for the kids, help them decompress after such a scary week." "Decompress from what?" from the stress of almost losing me, by leaving me. That's not what happened. Then explain to me what did happen, Marcus. Explain to me how a family deals with a medical crisis by abandoning the patient to go on vacation. He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands, probably trying to find words that would make their behavior sound reasonable. We were scared, he said finally. Seeing you like that, thinking we might lose you, it was terrifying. And when the doctors said you were going to be okay, we just wanted to celebrate, to do something positive after all that fear. You wanted to celebrate my survival by leaving me alone. We didn't think of it that way. How did you think of it? Another long pause. We thought of it as taking care of ourselves, so we could take care of you. Self-care, that's what they'd called it. $18,000 of self-care, funded by joint marital assets, while I struggled through physical therapy and emotional trauma. Marcus, did you try to use your credit cards yesterday? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What do you mean? I mean, did you try to make any purchases yesterday? Pay for meals, activities, anything? His face flushed. There were some issues with the cards. We thought it was just a security hold because of the international charges. It happens sometimes when you travel. It wasn't a security hold. Then what was it? It was the court-ordered freeze on joint assets, every account with both our names, every credit card linked to joint checking, every line of credit secured by marital property, all frozen as of Friday morning. Marcus stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You did this, you froze our accounts. I didn't do anything, Marcus. I was in a hospital bed, focused on learning to walk upstairs without chest pain, but apparently, someone who was looking out for my interest decided that preventing further financial damage was necessary. Financial damage, Goldie, it was a vacation, not an investment scam. It was an $18,000 vacation taken during my medical crisis, using funds I'd contributed to, and had no say in spending. In legal terms, that's called dissipation of marital assets. Legal term, Goldie, what have you done? The way he asked the question, with that tone of accusation and disbelief, told me everything I needed to know about how he saw the situation. I was the problem for protecting myself, not the person who'd created the problem by abandoning. I protected myself, Marcus. I made sure that, while I was vulnerable, and unable to manage my own affairs, no one could take advantage of my incapacity. Take advantage? We're your family, are you? Because families don't usually abandon each other in hospitals to go on luxury vacation. We didn't abandon you. We checked with the doctors. We made sure you were stable. We arranged for excellent care. You arranged for nursing care, Marcus. You didn't arrange for family support, for emotional comfort, for someone to hold my hand during the scary part. You arranged for strangers to do the job you were supposed to do. That's not fair. What's not fair is spending nearly $20,000 on a vacation, while your wife lies alone in a cardiac care unit, wondering if her family will ever come back. Marcus stood up, pacing to the window, clearly agitated. So what happens now? Do we just lose all our money? Do we have to live under some kind of court supervision? There is no we anymore, Marcus. He turned around, his face a mixture of confusion and panic. What do you mean? I mean, I filed for divorce. The papers will be served tomorrow morning. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the machines in the next room beeping, could hear conversations in the hallway, could hear the normal sounds of a hospital at night, continuing around us, while my marriage officially ended. Divorce.
Can't we go to counseling? Figure out how to fix this? Fix what, Marcus? The 27 years of my life I spent making everyone else's dreams come true while mine were dismissed as impractical. The decades of working extra hours to fund family priorities that somehow never included my interests. The pattern of social exclusion that left me working while you and the kids built relationships that didn't include me. It wasn't intentional. Does that matter? Whether it was intentional or just thoughtless, the effect was the same. I became invisible in my own life. You're not invisible. Then why didn't anyone notice that leaving me alone in a hospital while you vacationed in Hawaii was wrong? Why didn't anyone think that maybe, just maybe, I might need emotional support during my recovery? Why didn't anyone consider that I might have feelings about being abandoned during the worst crisis of my life? Marcus was quiet again, probably realizing that any answer he gave would only confirm what I was saying. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want a fair division of assets and a clean break. I want to start over with people who value me appropriately. I want to build a life where I matter. And the kids can make their own decisions about whether they want a relationship with me, but it will be on new terms. I'm not going to be anyone's convenient ATM anymore. Goldie, please, don't throw away our whole family over one mistake." It wasn't one mistake, Marcus. It was a pattern of mistakes, a system of neglect, a gradual erosion of respect that turned me into a stranger in my own life. Hawaii was just the moment I finally saw it clearly. He sat there for a long time, staring at the floor, occasionally shaking his head, like he could make this conversation disappear. Finally, he looked up at me with something that might have been genuine sadness. "I never meant for you to feel abandoned. But I did feel abandoned. And instead of staying to help me work through that feeling, you left me alone for a week to process it by myself. I thought you were okay." I was never okay with it, Marcus. I just didn't have enough fight left to argue with three people who'd already made up their minds that my feelings didn't matter. Your feelings do matter, do they? Because your actions suggest otherwise. You spent $18,000 of our money on a vacation I couldn't attend, didn't want you to take, and had no say in planning. You posted pictures on social media showing how much fun you were having without me. You called me once a day for 3 minutes to share vacation highlights while I struggled through physical therapy alone. We called every day. You called to ease your own guilt, not to provide me with support. There's a difference. Marcus stood up again, this time heading toward the door. "I need time to think about this. Take all the time you need, but the legal process is already in motion. The protective orders are in place and the financial separation is happening whether you think about it or not." "What about our house? What about it? Do I have to move out?" I considered the question. Our house, the one we'd bought together, renovated together, filled with 27 years of shared life, the one where I'd been gradually relegated to supporting roles while everyone else played lead character. The house is marital property, so that will be decided during the divorce proceedings. But Marcus, I won't be coming back there when I'm discharged. I'll be starting fresh somewhere else. Where will you go? Somewhere that belongs entirely to me. Somewhere no one can take for granted. He nodded slowly, probably beginning to understand that this wasn't a negotiation or a temporary crisis. This was an ending. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "What? Do you hate us, me and the kids?" I thought about that question carefully. Did I hate them? Was this decision driven by anger and hurt feelings? Or something deeper? "I don't hate you," I said finally, "but I don't trust you anymore, and I don't want to spend whatever time I have left trying to earn basic consideration from people who should have given it freely. What if we change? What if we do better? Marcus, you're 55 years old, Jessica is 28, David is 26. If you were going to learn how to treat me with respect and consideration, you would have learned it by now. I can't spend the rest of my life hoping you'll eventually see me as a person whose feelings matter." He opened the door to leave, then turned back one more time. "Goldie, I'm sorry. I'm really truly sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know." "I believe you're sorry," I said, "but being sorry doesn't undo the damage, and more importantly, being sorry doesn't guarantee it won't happen again." After he left, I sat in the quiet of my hospital room, feeling surprisingly calm. No tears, no regret, no second guessing, just a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Jessica, Dad told us what happened. Can we come see you tomorrow?" I stared at the message, wondering what Marcus had told them, how he'd framed the situation. Had he explained the financial freeze, the divorce filing, the systematic analysis of their neglect, or had he painted me as an unreasonable woman having some kind of medical crisis breakdown? I typed back, "Of course, visiting hours start at 10. Whatever they wanted to say, whatever justifications or arguments or emotional appeals they'd prepared, I was ready to hear them, but I was also ready to stand firm in my decision to protect myself and demand better treatment." They arrived together the next morning, Jessica and David looking like they'd spent the night strategizing. They were both dressed more formally than usual, like they were attending a business meeting rather than visiting their mother in the hospital. Jessica carried coffee for everyone, including me, which felt like an attempt to establish goodwill. David had his serious face on, the expression he wore when he was trying to solve problems. "Mom," Jessica said, settling into one of the chairs. Dad explained about the accounts being frozen and the legal issues. "We want to understand what's happening. What did your father tell you?" "He said you were upset about Hawaii and you hired a lawyer to freeze all the money," David said. "He said you're filing for divorce because we went on vacation while you were in the hospital." I nodded. That was about what I'd expected, a version of events that made me sound petty and vindictive while minimizing their behavior. "Is that an accurate summary of the situation?" I asked. Jessica and David exchanged glances. "Isn't it?" Jessica said. "Let me ask you both a question. Do you think it was appropriate to spend $18,000 on a luxury vacation while I was recovering from emergency cardiac surgery?" "Mom, you were stable," David said. "The doctors said you were going to be fine." "That's not what I asked. I asked if you thought it was appropriate." Another exchange of glances. "We thought it was okay because you were past the dangerous part," Jessica said carefully. "And you didn't think I might need emotional support during my recovery. You didn't think I might want my family nearby while I learned to walk again, while I dealt with the fear of another heart attack, while I processed the reality that I almost died." "We figured you'd be sleeping most of the time anyway," David said, "and the nurses were taking good care of you." "The nurses were managing my medical care. They weren't providing family support. There's a difference." "Mom, we were scared," Jessica. "Seeing you like that, thinking we might lose you, it was traumatic for us too. So you dealt with your trauma by leaving me alone to deal with mine." "We didn't think of it that way." "How did you think of it?" "We thought of it as taking a break after a really stressful week," David said. "We thought it would be good for everyone if we recharged so we could be more helpful when you came home." "More helpful?" "David, I've been in this hospital for 10 days. How many times have you visited?" He looked uncomfortable. "A few times. 3 times. You've visited 3 times in 10 days. Jessica, how many times have you visited?" "I don't know, Mom. I've been here a lot." 4 times. 4 visits in 10 days, but you managed to squeeze in 7 days in Hawaii. "That's not fair, Jessica. You're making it sound like we don't care about you." "I'm making it sound like you prioritized a vacation over supporting me during a medical crisis, because that's what happened." "We called every day," David said. "You called once a day for about 3 minutes to share vacation highlights." "That's not support. That's checking a box so you could feel better about abandoning me." "We didn't abandon you," Jessica said, her voice rising slightly. "What would you call it? I nearly died, had emergency surgery, and was left alone in a hospital while my family went to Hawaii." "What's your word for that?" "We call it making the best of a difficult situation," David said. "For who?" "Making the best of a difficult situation for who?" "Because it certainly wasn't best for me." They were both quiet, probably realizing that every answer they gave was making my point stronger. "Look," I said, "I understand that you were scared and stressed. That's normal when someone you love has a medical crisis. But normal families pull together during crises. They don't fly apart. Normal families prioritize the patient's emotional needs, not their own desire for vacation time." "What do you want us to do now?" Jessica asked. "Cancel every trip we ever take. Never leave town again in case something happens to you. I want you to understand that your behavior was hurtful and wrong. I want you to acknowledge that abandoning me in the hospital was a mistake. And I want you to decide whether you're willing to treat me with basic consideration going forward." "Of course we'll treat you with consideration," David said. "Will you? Because your track record suggests otherwise. Over the past 2 years, how many family events have I been excluded from? How many social activities have been scheduled when I couldn't attend? How many financial decisions have been made without consulting me?" "Mom, you're always working," Jessica said. "You're never available for anything." "I'm always working extra shifts to help fund family activities I'm not invited to participate in." "There's a difference." "That's not true, isn't it, Jessica?" When was the last time you invited me to something that didn't involve me providing money or labor? When was the last time you wanted my company instead of my contribution? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it, apparently unable to think of an example. David, when was the last time you called me just to talk, not to ask for money or help with something, just to have a conversation? Same response, mouth open then closed, no answer. The truth is, you've both learned to see me as a resource rather than a person, someone who pays for things and does things, but whose feelings and preferences don't really matter. That's not how we see you, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then explain to me how 3 people who love and respect someone decide to leave them alone in a hospital to go on vacation. We thought it would be okay, David said weakly. You thought it would be convenient. You thought I'd accept it because I always accept things that make your lives easier, even when they make mine harder. Mom, what do you want from us? Jessica asked, sounding frustrated. I want you to decide whether you want a real relationship with me, or whether you just want to keep me around as a convenient resource, because I'm not going to be anyone's ATM anymore. We don't think of you as an ATM, don't you? When you needed money for graduate school, who did you call? When your car needed expensive repairs, who helped pay for them? When David wanted to start his business, who co-signed the loans? But when I needed emotional support during a medical crisis, where were you? We were dealing with our own feelings about almost losing you, Jessica. In Hawaii, you were dealing with your feelings about almost losing me, by drinking Mai Tais on a beach. Mom, that's not fair. What's not fair is that I spent 27 years putting everyone else's needs first, and when I finally needed something, you all disappeared. We didn't disappear, we just took a trip. You took a trip during my medical crisis using money I'd contributed to, without consulting me, while I was too vulnerable to object, and then you posted pictures showing how much fun you were having without me. David pulled out his phone. Mom, we can delete the posts. We didn't think about how they might make you feel. It's not about the posts, David. It's about the mindset that made you think posting pictures of your family vacation while I recovered alone was appropriate. What can we do to fix this? Jessica asked. You can't fix it. It's already done. The question is whether you want to build something new based on mutual respect and consideration. Of course we do. Then you need to understand that things are going to be different. I'm not going to be the family ATM anymore. I'm not going to work extra shifts to fund activities I'm not included in. I'm not going to prioritize your financial needs over my own emotional well-being. What does that mean, practically? David asked. It means you'll need to fund your own life. It means you'll need to consider my feelings before making plans that affect me. It means you'll need to treat me like someone whose presence adds value to your life, not just someone who provides money and services. And if we do that, you'll call off the divorce? Jessica asked. The divorce is between me and your father. Your relationship with me is separate. You can have a good relationship with me while I'm divorced from your father, or you can have no relationship with me while I'm married to him. Your choice. But Mom, if you divorce Dad, everything changed. The house, the money, the family dynamic, everything already changed, Jessica. It changed when you decided I was expendable during a medical crisis. I'm just making it official. They stayed for another hour, alternating between arguing and pleading, trying to find some combination of words that would make me change my mind. But my mind was made up, not out of anger or spite, but out of a clear understanding of what I needed to do to protect my future. When they finally left, David turned back at the door. Mom, we love you. We really do. I believe you love me, I said. But love without respect isn't enough anymore. Love without consideration isn't sustainable. Love without basic human decency isn't worth having. We can do better. Maybe you can, but I'm not going to spend what's left of my life waiting to find out. That afternoon, Dr. Patel gave me final clearance for discharge. My heart was strong, my recovery was ahead of schedule, and I was ready to start the next phase of my life. You seem different than when you were admitted, he observed. More centered, somehow. I figured some things out while I was here. Good. That's often the most important part of recovery, addressing the underlying stressors that contributed to the cardiac event in the first place. Dr. Patel, can I ask you something?
Of course, in your professional opinion, could the stress of being gradually marginalized in my own family have contributed to my heart attack? He considered the question carefully. Chronic emotional stress is a significant risk factor for cardiac events. Feeling unsupported, unvalued, or constantly accommodating others' needs, at the expense of your own, can absolutely create the kind of physiological stress that leads to heart problems. So taking steps to eliminate that stress is medically advisable. Absolute. Whatever changes you're making to reduce stress and increase your sense of agency and self-worth, those changes are likely to improve both your emotional and physical health. Thank you. That's exactly what I needed to hear. I was discharged Wednesday morning, but I didn't go home. Instead, I went to a furnished apartment I'd rented the day before, a clean, quiet place that belonged entirely to me. No shared history, no accumulated resentments, no expectations or obligations beyond what I chose to take on. For the first time in 27 years, I was living in a space where my preferences mattered, where my needs came first, where no one could take my comfort or security for granted. It felt like coming back to life. The apartment was on the third floor of a converted Victorian house, with tall windows that let in morning light and a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. It came furnished with simple, clean pieces that felt neutral and calming. No heavy furniture loaded with memories, no decorative items that carried the weight of shared history, no photographs that reminded me of better times that turned out to be lies. I spent my first morning there drinking coffee from a white ceramic mug, while sitting in a chair that no one else had ever occupied, watching people walk their dogs and head to work, living their normal lives while mine underwent complete reconstruction. The silence was different here. At home, silence had always felt loaded with unspoken tensions, unmet expectations, the weight of accommodating everyone else's needs, while my own went unnoticed. Here silence felt clean, empty in a good way, like a blank canvas waiting for me to decide what came next. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I'd left the hospital, Marcus calling, texting, leaving voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to pleading, Jessica sending long messages about family unity and working things out, David trying to schedule meetings to discuss the financial situation, as if this were a business negotiation, rather than the end of relationships that had died years before. I'd had the courage to bury them. I turned the phone off and put it in a drawer. For the first time in decades, I wanted complete quiet, no external demands on my attention, no one else's crisis requiring my immediate response. Rebecca Chen had scheduled a follow-up meeting for Thursday afternoon, something about reviewing the legal proceedings and discussing next steps. I drove myself there, another small victory in my recovery, navigating city traffic without the chest tightness that had been plaguing me for months before the heart attack. Her office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel, and the kind of modern efficiency that spoke of people who got things done. Rebecca greeted me with the same warm professionalism she'd shown at the hospital, but I could see satisfaction in her expression, the look of someone whose work had achieved the desired outcome. "How are you settling in?" she asked, as we sat down in her conference room. "Better than I expected." I didn't realize how much energy I'd been spending just managing everyone else's emotions and expectations. That's common in situations like yours. People often underestimate the psychological toll of being consistently undervalued. When that pressure is removed, the relief can be dramatic. She opened a thick folder and spread documents across the table. "Let's talk about where things stand legally and financially." The divorce proceedings were moving faster than I'd anticipated. Marcus had been served with papers Tuesday morning, and his attorney had already filed a response requesting mediation, rather than litigation. He wants to negotiate. He wants to avoid a public trial where the pattern of financial and emotional neglect would be documented in court records. Smart move on his part, actually. "The evidence we've compiled is quite damaging." She showed me a comprehensive analysis of our marriage that read like an autopsy report. 27 years of financial decisions dissected and categorized, revealing patterns I'd been too close to see. My income consistently redirected to fund other people's priorities, major purchases made without my consultation, social expenses that excluded me while including everyone else, investment decisions that protected Marcus's interests while leaving me financially vulnerable. The most compelling evidence is the timeline of neglect escalation, Rebecca said, pointing to a chart that tracked the gradual increase in exclusionary behavior over the past 5 years. It's not random or unconscious, there's a deliberate pattern of marginalizing you while increasing extraction of your resources. Extraction, that was exactly what it had been, not sharing or partnership, but extraction. Taking my money, my labor, my emotional support while giving back increasingly less consideration, respect and inclusion. What's his position on the financial division? Initially he wanted a 50-50 split of everything, including your retirement accounts and personal saving. When we pointed out that such a division would reward him for financial abandonment, his attorney revised their position. To what? He keeps his retirement and personal accounts, you keep yours. Joint property gets divided based on actual contributions rather than just time of ownership. And he accepts full responsibility for any debt incurred during the Hawaii trip. It was better than I'd expected, but still felt like he was trying to minimize the consequences of his behavior. What about the house? That's where it gets interesting. The house is worth approximately $420,000, with a mortgage balance of $80,000. Normally, you'd each get half the equity, but given the documented pattern of your exclusion from social activities held in that house, and the fact that you were gradually relegated to supporting roles in your own home, we're arguing for additional compensation. What kind of additional compensation? Rebecca smiled. Emotional damages, pain and suffering, compensation for years of contributing to a property where you were systematically made to feel unwelcome. Can you actually claim emotional damages in a divorce, when there's documented evidence of deliberate emotional abuse? Absolutely. And we have extensive documentation. She pulled out another folder, this one containing screenshots, social media posts, and communication records that painted a picture of systematic exclusion. I'd been too embedded to recognize photos from family gatherings where you're either absent or visibly marginalized, social media posts celebrating family activities you weren't included in, text message threads between your husband and children discussing family plans without including you in the conversation. I stared at messages I'd never seen, conversations between Marcus, Jessica, and David planning activities, making decisions, sharing jokes and observations about their lives together. A parallel family dynamic that had existed alongside our official family, one where I was a topic of discussion rather than a participant. They have a group chat called the Core Family, Rebecca said gently. You're not included, the Core Family. They'd literally created a designation for their real family relationships, one that explicitly excluded me. While I'd been working extra shifts to fund their activities, they'd been bonding over my absence, creating intimacy through my exclusion. How long has this group chat existed?
The good news, Rebecca continued, is that this level of documentation makes your case extremely strong. Marcus's attorney knows they can't win a trial, which is why they're pushing for mediation. What would you recommend? Mediation, but on your terms. You hold all the cards here. The evidence is overwhelming. Your financial position is protected, and public exposure of their behavior would be devastating for all of them professionally and socially. I thought about that. Marcus worked in commercial real estate, an industry where reputation and relationships mattered. Jessica was a marketing executive at a firm that valued corporate social responsibility. David's startup depended on investor confidence and public perception. A divorce trial that exposed their systematic emotional abuse of a family member during her medical crisis would destroy their professional credibility. What kind of settlement could we reasonably expect? Rebecca consulted her notes. Full ownership of the house, which gives you a place to live, mortgage-free plus significant equity, 70% of liquid joint assets, given the pattern of your contributions being used for their exclusive benefit, full protection of your retirement accounts and personal saving, and monthly spousal support for 5 years to compensate for the career limitations you accepted to support the family. That seems like a lot. It's exactly what you're entitled to based on 27 years of contributing more than you receive, plus compensation for the documented emotional abuse and financial exploitation. I sat back in my chair trying to process the scope of what Rebecca was describing. Not just escape from a bad situation, but actual justice. Not just protection of my assets, but compensation for years of being systematically undervalued. There's one more thing, Rebecca said. The AI system has continued monitoring communications between your family members. They're planning an intervention. What kind of intervention? They want to present a united front to convince you that you're having some kind of medical crisis breakdown and that your behavior is irrational. They've scheduled a meeting for this weekend, where they plan to pressure you into dropping the divorce and returning to the family dynamic. All three of them, plus Marcus's sister and her husband, and possibly a family friend, who's a therapist. They're treating this as a mental health crisis, rather than a justified response to systematic mistreatment. Of course rather than examining their own behavior, they were pathologizing my response to it. Rather than acknowledging that their treatment of me had been wrong, they were framing my self-protection as illness. What do you recommend? Don't attend any meeting where they outnumber you 6-1 isn't a conversation, it's an ambush. Let them have their intervention without you. Let them explain to each other why abandoning you in the hospital was reasonable, and why protecting yourself financially is crazy. What if they show up at my apartment? They don't know where you live, and they can't find out legally. Your address is protected under the court order. If they somehow locate you and show up uninvited, that's harassment and violation of a protective order. I felt a surge of gratitude for the legal fortress that had been built around my independence. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I had actual control over who could access me and when. Rebecca, can I ask you something personal? Of course. How often do you see cases like this, where the family dynamic has become this systematically abusive? More often than you'd think, especially among professional families, where there's enough money to make exploitation financially worthwhile. It's usually gradual, like you experience. One person slowly becomes the resource that funds everyone else's lifestyle, while their own needs become increasingly irrelevant. Why doesn't the person being exploited recognize it sooner? Because it happens incrementally, and because the person being exploited usually has a high tolerance for putting others' needs first. By the time the pattern is established, it feels normal. Plus, the family develops sophisticated justifications for why the arrangement is fair or necessary, like saying I was too busy with work to participate in family activities. Exactly. Or saying you preferred contributing financially rather than being involved socially, or suggesting that your participation wasn't necessary because everyone else had things handled. All justifications I'd heard and accepted, explanations that made my exclusion sound like my choice rather than their decision. The other factor, Rebecca continued, is that this kind of systematic marginalization often accelerates during times of vulnerability. Your heart attack wasn't just the moment you finally saw the pattern clearly, it was also the moment they felt safe to abandon you completely, because they assumed you'd be too weak to fight back. They miscalculated, dramatically. They expected you to be grateful for any attention and willing to accept whatever scraps of consideration they offered. Instead, you protected yourself and demanded accountability. I left Rebecca's office feeling both vindicated and overwhelmed. Vindicated because an objective professional had confirmed that my perceptions were accurate, that the treatment I'd endured was genuinely abusive, and that my response was not only justified, but legally supported. Overwhelmed because the scope of the betrayal was larger than I'd realized, more systematic and deliberate than I'd wanted to believe. That evening I sat on my little balcony with a glass of wine, watching the neighborhood settle into evening routine. Families walking together after dinner, couples sitting on porches, people living normal lives where consideration and inclusion were basic expectations rather than rare gifts. My phone, which I'd turned back on to check messages from Rebecca and my doctors, buzzed with a call from Jessica. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me and I listened to the message. Mom, this is ridiculous. We need to talk like adults. We've scheduled a family meeting for Saturday afternoon to discuss this situation rationally. Dad's sister is flying in and Doc Morrison from Dad's golf club is going to facilitate the conversation. We need to work this out before you do something you'll regret. Dr. Morrison from Dad's golf club. They'd recruited a family friend who was a therapist to help them convince me that protecting myself was irrational. A meeting where I'd be outnumbered 6-1, where my responses would be analyzed and pathologized, where the goal was to restore the previous dynamic rather than address the problems that had led to its collapse. I deleted the message without responding. Friday brought a text from Marcus. Goldie, please reconsider this course of action. Think about what you're throwing away. Think about our history, our family, everything we've built together. Don't let one misunderstanding destroy 27 years. One misunderstanding. That's how he was characterizing systematic emotional abuse and financial exploitation. A misunderstanding, as if the problem was my interpretation of their behavior rather than their behavior itself. I deleted that message too. Saturday afternoon came and went quiet. I spent it reading on my balcony, taking a long walk through the neighborhood, cooking myself a simple dinner. Around 4 o'clock, my phone started buzzing with missed calls and increasingly frantic messages from the intervention I wasn't attending. From Jessica. Mom, where are you? We're all here waiting for you. From David. This is childish. We drove 3 hours to have this conversation. From Marcus. Goldie, your absence is proving their point about your mental state. From someone I didn't recognize. Mrs. Turner. This is Dr. Morris. Your family is very concerned about your recent behavior. It would be helpful if you could join us for a brief conversation. I turned the phone off again and finished making dinner. Let them sit in a room together trying to explain why abandoning someone in the hospital was reasonable behavior. Let them analyze my absence and develop theories about my mental health. Let them experience what it felt like to be excluded from important conversation. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were having a family meeting about my behavior that didn't include me, just like they'd had years of family activities and decisions that didn't include me. The difference was that this time, my exclusion was my choice. Sunday morning brought a knock at my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw Marcus standing in the hallway, looking tired and desperate. He knocked again, more insistently. Goldie, I know you're in there. Please, just talk to me for 5 minutes. I sat on my couch and waited. Eventually the knocking stopped and I heard his footsteps retreating down the hall. He'd found my address somehow, despite the legal protections, but he hadn't tried to force his way in or create a scene. Small mercies. An hour later my building manager called. Miss Turner, there's a man here asking about you. He says he's your husband and he needs to deliver some important documents. Should I let him up? No. Thank you. If he has documents to deliver, he can go through our attorneys. He seems pretty upset. I'm sure he is, but he's not welcome here. Understood. I'll let him know. The next day, Rebecca called with an update on the settlement negotiations. Marcus's attorney has revised their offer significantly. He's agreed to your terms on almost everything: house ownership, asset division, spousal support. The only sticking point is the timeline. What about the timeline? He wants to delay the final decree for 6 months, ostensibly to allow for reconciliation attempts. What he really wants is time to pressure you into changing your mind. Absolutely not. That's what I figured you'd say. I'll counter with 60 days to finalize everything. Take it or leave it. What about Jessica and David? Have they been in contact with you? David's been calling my office trying to schedule meetings to discuss the financial impact on the family. Jessica sent a long letter about how divorce will traumatize everyone and destroy family relationships. What did you tell them? That you're an adult making informed decisions about your own life, and that their opinions about those decisions are irrelevant to the legal proceedings. Good. Goldie, there's something else. The AI monitoring system has picked up some concerning communications. What kind of concerning? They're discussing ways to pressure you into returning. Marcus has been researching legal ways to have you declared mentally incompetent. Jessica's been contacting your friends and colleagues to build a case that you're having some kind of breakdown. I felt my heart rate spike, the old anxiety response to being under attack. But this time, instead of panic, I felt anger. Clean, focused anger at people who would rather destroy my reputation than examine their own behavior. Can they actually do that? Have me declared incompetent? Not with the evidence we have. Your medical records show complete mental clarity throughout your hospitalization and recovery. Your financial decisions have been rational and well-informed. Your legal choices have been made with full understanding of the consequences. Any competency challenge would backfire spectacularly, but they're going to Marcus's attorney strongly advised against it,
but he seems determined to pursue every possible avenue to avoid accepting responsibility for his behavior. What about Jessica contacting my friend? That's harassment, and potentially defamatory if she's making false claims about your mental health. We can get a restraining order if necessary. Do it. The restraining order, all of it. Whatever legal protection you can provide. I want it. I'm tired of being reasonable with people who have never extended me the same courtesy. Rebecca made notes on her legal pad. I'll file the paperwork Monday morning. Complete protection from contact, communication, or third-party harassment. Thank you. Goldie, how are you holding up emotionally? This level of family attack can be devastating, even when you know you're making the right choices. I considered the question, how was I holding up? I was sleeping better than I had in years. I was eating meals I actually wanted instead of cooking what everyone else preferred. I was reading books I enjoyed instead of watching television shows chosen by committee. I was living in a space that reflected my preferences instead of accommodating everyone else's needs. I'm holding up remarkably well, I said, better than I've felt in years. Actually, that's the reaction of someone who's been living under chronic stress for a long time. When that stress is removed, the relief can be dramatic. I keep waiting for the sadness for the grief about losing my family, but mostly I just feel free. You haven't lost your family, Goldie. You've escaped from people who were systematically exploiting you while calling it family. There's a difference. After the call ended, I sat in my quiet apartment, thinking about that distinction. Family implies mutual care, consideration, support. What I'd been living with was a system where I provided care, consideration, and support, while receiving manipulation, exploitation, and abandonment in return. I hadn't lost my family, I'd just finally admitted that I'd never really had one. That realization should have been devastating. Instead, it felt liberating. I was 53 years old, financially secure, legally protected, and completely free to build whatever life I wanted. No one else's needs to consider, no one else's preferences to accommodate, no one else's judgment to worry about. For the first time in decades, I was living for myself. Monday brought news that Marcus had backed down from his competency challenge and accepted the 60-day timeline for finalizing the divorce. Jessica and David had been served with restraining orders prohibiting them from contacting me directly or through third party. The legal fortress around my independence was complete. Tuesday, I visited Dr. Patel for my follow-up appointment. My heart function was excellent, my blood pressure was normal, and my stress levels were dramatically improved. Whatever changes you've made in your life are working, he said, reviewing my test results. Your cardiovascular health has improved significantly since your discharge. I eliminated some major sources of chronic stress. Good for you. Stress management is often more effective than medication for preventing future cardiac events. Dr. Patel, can I ask you something? In your medical opinion, was the stress of my family situation a contributing factor to my heart attack? Absolutely. Chronic emotional stress, especially the kind that comes from feeling powerless or consistently undervalued, is a major risk factor for cardiac events. The changes you've made aren't just improving your quality of life, they're potentially saving your life. So what I'm doing isn't just emotionally healthy, it's medically necessary. I'd say that's an accurate assessment. You're not being selfish or vindictive, you're taking medically advised steps to protect your health. I left his office feeling validated in a way that went beyond legal or financial considerations. My decision to protect myself wasn't just justified, it was medically necessary. Staying in an abusive situation would have literally killed me. Wednesday afternoon, I received a call from Claire. I just heard about the restraining orders, she said. Good for you. How did you hear about them? Jessica called me, trying to get me to talk sense into you. I told her the only sense I saw was you finally protecting yourself from people who'd been treating you terribly for years. What did she say to that? She said I didn't understand the full situation. I told her I understood it perfectly, and that's why I supported your decision 100%. Thank you for that, Goldie. I'm proud of you. I know this isn't easy, but you're doing the right thing. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh, if I should give them a chance to change. How many chances have you given them over the years? How many times have you accepted their explanations, and excuses and promises to do better. I thought about that dozens of times, hundreds, maybe. Every exclusion explained away, every financial decision justified, every dismissal of my feelings rationalized. Too many to count, right? And what changed? Nothing. It just got worse. Exactly. People who are capable of change do it when the consequences of not changing become clear. People who aren't capable of change just get better at making excuses. Which category do you think they fall into, based on their current behavior? The excuse category. Instead of acknowledging what they did wrong and working to repair the damage, they're trying to have you declared mentally incompetent. That tells you everything you need to know about their capacity for genuine change. She was right. Real accountability would have looked like apologies, acknowledgement of harm, concrete steps to make amends. Instead, I was getting legal challenges, harassment campaigns, and attempts to gaslight me into believing that protecting myself was evidence of mental illness. Thursday evening, I made a decision that surprised me. I called a realtor about looking at houses, not because I didn't like my apartment, but because I wanted something that was truly mine, chosen by me, reflecting my preferences without any input or compromise from anyone else. The realtor, a cheerful woman named Patricia, met me Friday morning to look at properties in my price range. With the equity from the marital home, plus my personal savings, I could afford something nice, not extravagant, but comfortable and completely mine. The third house we looked at felt right immediately. A small craftsman bungalow with hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, a kitchen with windows overlooking a garden, and a front porch perfect for morning coffee. It was half the size of the house I'd shared with Marcus, but every square foot felt welcoming rather than loaded with complicated history. This one, I told Patricia, I want to make an offer on this one. It's a lovely house, she agreed. Perfect for someone starting a new chapter. Starting a new chapter, that's exactly what I was doing. Not ending something, but beginning something entirely different. Something that belonged to me completely. By the following Tuesday, my offer had been accepted. By Friday, the inspection was complete, and the mortgage was approved. I would close on my new house the same week my divorce became final. Rebecca called with the news that Marcus had signed the final settlement agreement. He's not happy about it, but his attorney convinced him that fighting would only make things worse. You'll have the house deed, the financial transfers, and the legal freedom all finalized within 10 days. How did he seem when he signed? According to his attorney, resigned but angry. He apparently said, this wasn't over, that you'd regret destroying the family over a misunderstanding. Still calling it a misunderstanding. Some people never develop the capacity for genuine accountability. They can't admit wrongdoing, so they reframe everything as other people's misperceptions or overreactions. What about Jessica and David? No direct contact, obviously, because of the restraining orders, but their attorneys have been asking about whether there's any possibility of reconciliation. What did you tell them? That reconciliation would require acknowledgement of harm, genuine apology, and concrete behavior change. Since none of those things have materialized, reconciliation isn't currently possible. Is it terrible that I don't miss them? It's healthy. You're not missing the real relationships you had with them, because those relationships were based on your exploitation. You might miss the fantasy of what you thought those relationships were, but missing a fantasy isn't the same as missing real people. That distinction helped clarify something I'd been struggling with. I didn't miss Marcus's actual presence, with his constant demands and financial entitlement. I missed the idea of having a partner who considered my feelings. I didn't miss Jessica and David's actual behavior, with their expectation that I fund their lives, while accepting exclusion from them. I missed the idea of having children who valued my company. But ideas and reality were different things. The reality was that I'd been living with people who saw me as useful rather than valuable, convenient, rather than beloved. Missing that reality would be like missing a chronic illness. 10 days later, I sat in Rebecca's office, signing the final divorce papers, while Marcus signed identical documents in his attorney's office across town. 27 years of marriage legally dissolved with signatures on paperwork, no dramatic confrontations or final conversation.